They laughed as they twisted the key in the lock, sealing me inside my own bedroom. Let's see how long she lasts without her pills. I heard her say, then footsteps, then silence. And I sat on the edge of the bed, 81 years old, staring at the door they'd closed on me like I was a storage box to be tucked away in the attic. I didn't move for a while, not because I was afraid, though I admit there was a flash of that, but because my hands were trembling with something sharper than fear. Anger, I think. No, not anger. A cold, focused clarity. They'd locked me in. They'd taken my medication. They'd left me water, dry crackers, and a plastic bucket. That was their kindness. They didn't want a scene if I started seizing in front of guests. Better to let it happen behind a closed door. That woman, Clara, my daughter-in-law, had smiled through her teeth at dinner just 2 nights ago. "We'll take care of everything, Evelyn. You just rest. You don't need to worry about a thing anymore." And I hadn't said much. I never do, not since Gerald died. My son Peter didn't say anything when she turned the key. He looked at the floor like a boy being sent to the principal's office. He used to hold my hand crossing the street. Now he won't even meet my eyes when they lock me in my own room. The safe was downstairs. I'd seen it when they brought it in. "For important documents," she said. Though it went right into the coat closet, bolted to the floor. I knew my medications were in it, because I'd seen her label the bottles with my name in thick black marker like property. Eber BP, Eberch thyroid. Everything accounted for. Everything under control. What Clara didn't know, what they both seemed to have forgotten, is that I'm not just a body taking up space. I built this house. I bought it with Gerald in 1971, brick by brick, savings by savings. My name is still on the deed. It was only kindness, or maybe weakness, that made me split the downstairs into an apartment for Peter and his new bride. Now I see that kindness was taken as surrender. I stood up slow and careful. I've got arthritis in both knees, but the pain reminds me I'm still alive, still moving. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. I walked to the window, lifted the curtain with 2 fingers. The sun was setting. The backyard was quiet. I knew the routine well. Clara always left at 7:45 on Tuesdays for her wellness class. A lie I was certain, but one I pretended to believe. Peter worked late. Their son, my grandson Evan, was away at college. No witnesses. Just me and the quiet creak of a house that was no longer mine. Except it was still legally mine. They didn't think I'd last long without the pills. But what they didn't count on, what people never count on with women like me, is how long we've already lasted. How many nights we've already survived sitting next to hospital beds, doing bills by candlelight, patching school uniforms, burying husbands, holding back tears at the bank. They think they're breaking something new. But we've been broken before and we've rebuilt. No, I wasn't going to panic. Not yet. I counted the hours. I counted my breath. I examined the hinges on the door, the narrowness of the window, the old metal vent above the closet. I made a plan. And before I went to sleep that night, curled up under the quilt I made with my mother in 1958, I whispered aloud, for no one but myself. They think this house is theirs now, but they've forgotten who built it. The night was long, but I didn't sleep much. The body rests differently when it's been wronged. There's no peace in a bed behind a locked door. Every creak of the old wood sounded louder. Every shift of the wind made the house groan like it too was tired of the lies. I lay there listening. At one point, I heard the TV downstairs. Some talk show. Clara's voice rising in fake laughter. The door to the safe must have clicked open because I heard metal scrape and the muffled clink of pill bottles. She probably checked on them like a warden checking cell keys. Satisfied, she locked them again. She didn't even come up to look in on me. Not that I expected it. By morning, my mouth was dry as paper. The water they'd left me was already halfway gone. The crackers tasted like sawdust, but I ate one slowly. Small bites. I had to keep my strength up at least until Friday. That's when I knew someone would come. The cleaning lady, Rosa, arrived every Friday at noon. She wasn't supposed to come upstairs. Clara always made sure of that, but I'd find a way, and if not her, then maybe the postman. Maybe Evan, my grandson, who sometimes came home unannounced. He was always better than the rest of them. A little distracted, sure, but kind in the ways young people rarely bother to be. He's the only one who calls me Grandma instead of Evelyn. The only one who listens without checking his phone. But I couldn't count on Evan. I couldn't count on anyone. That had become clear. Back in 2004, when Gerald died, Peter was the one who suggested they move in. Just to be closer, Mom. We don't want you alone in that big house. It sounded sweet. I was still working part-time at the time, running the local library's weekend programs. I liked my space, my garden, my Sunday mornings with coffee and the paper, but I said yes. Clara wanted to remodel the downstairs. I paid for the permits. She wanted hardwood floors. I paid for those too. Then came the new kitchen, the split electrical systems, the back door entrance. All of it just temporary, they said. But temporary became permanent. Permanent became assumed. The next year they suggested putting the house in Peter's name for estate simplicity, but I refused. I knew better than to hand over what little security I had. I didn't say no loudly, but I said it. And that silence, that's when the shift began. First, it was small things. Clara correcting my stories at the dinner table, Peter laughing when I asked how to use the new thermostat. Then the whispers behind closed doors, the sudden decision to change locks for safety. I wasn't asked. I was informed they took over grocery shopping. At first, I thought it was kindness, but then my brand of cereal disappeared. Then my tea. Then my mail stopped coming to my door and was sorted by Clara. She said it was to avoid confusion. I was being erased. I kept a notebook. I started writing things down. Dates, times, words that didn't sit right. Clara saying, "You should really think about simplifying your medications. So many at your age aren't necessary." Peter saying, "The house is too much for you now, don't you think?" I wrote it all down. Not because I thought anyone would believe me, but because I needed to remember. When you get older, they all treat your memory like it's a leaking pipe. A drip here, a loss there. I still remember every name of every child I read to at Story Hour in 1983. I remember the smell of my wedding bouquet. I remember who I am. And I remember that my will, the real one, is still in the metal box under the sewing cabinet. Clara never looked there. She assumed I had nothing left. I made my plan that morning. I cleaned myself as best I could. I opened the vent cover with a hairpin I'd hidden in the lining of the curtain. I wrote a note on the back of a greeting card, something that wouldn't be suspicious if found. I folded it small and placed it in the vent. It read, "To whom it may concern. I am being kept here against my will. My medication has been removed. The people downstairs are not my caretakers. My name is Evelyn Birch. I am of sound mind. Please help." And then I waited again. By the second night, my body was beginning to feel the absence. It started with the swelling, my ankles tight and hot, the skin puffing up around the bone like overfilled dough. The blood pressure meds were the first ones they took. Clara said I didn't need so many chemicals, but she wasn't the one who saw stars dancing in front of her eyes after climbing the stairs. Then came the headaches. Dull at first, then sharper, like tiny chisels behind the eyes. But I didn't cry. Not once. I've cried before. I cried in the parking lot the day Gerald got his diagnosis. I cried alone in the church bathroom during Peter's wedding. Not because I wasn't happy for him, but because I knew she'd never really see me as family. I cried when I had to sell my mother's ring to pay for Evan's school books. But now, no more tears for people who only check on you when they need a signature. I lay on the bed, legs propped up on a pillow, counting the cracks in the ceiling. 1, 2, 3 near the light fixture. 4 more above the closet. There used to be a little star, shaped one above Gerald's side of the bed, but the paint crew covered it up 5 years ago when Clara insisted on refreshing the upstairs for resale value. That was the first time she said it out loud. When this place sells, we could get a decent condo by the lake. When not, if not someday, when that night, lying there with my skin buzzing from the rising blood pressure, I thought of something my mother once said. "They can take a lot from you, Evelyn, but only if you let them. Sooner or later, people will try. That's human. But the trick is knowing the moment it becomes too much. That moment you stop being kind and start being clear." I had been kind for too long. For years, I'd bent around their moods, their choices, their messes. I gave Peter my time, my savings, my trust. And now Clara had taken the final thing, my autonomy, and locked it in a steel box like it was a liability. But I had one advantage they didn't count on. I wasn't afraid of discomfort. This house had seen lean years. In '78, when Gerald was laid off for 6 months, I rationed our food down to a science. Beans on Monday, soup on Tuesday, pancakes for dinner when we ran out of meat. When Evan was born premature, I slept upright in a plastic chair for 19 nights straight just to be near his incubator. When my knees started to go, I refused the surgery. I learned to move through pain, not around it. So no, I wasn't afraid of being locked in a room. I wasn't afraid of missed pills or Clara's smug smile. I was afraid of forgetting who I was, and that fear kept me awake. At one point in the night, I crept to the door and pressed my ear against it. I could hear music, something low and rhythmic, laughter, a glass clinking. Clara had friends over. They were having a girls' night downstairs while the old woman upstairs wilted. I imagined her dramatic sighs. She's just not all there anymore. It's so sad. It was a familiar narrative. Easier to paint someone as confused than to admit you're cruel. I pulled the quilt tighter around me and focused on breathing. Inhale, count to 5, exhale, count to 7. It was a trick the nurse had taught me in the hospital after my fall last year. It helped slow the panic, bring the body back down, let the mind take over again. And I needed my mind now more than ever. Friday was coming. If Rosa didn't notice anything, if the note didn't make it into the right hands, if Evan didn't come home, I couldn't leave it to chance. I stood slowly, my joint stiff but functional. I moved the nightstand, an old oak thing Gerald built, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Behind a stack of knitting magazines was a paperback novel with a cracked spine. Inside I'd carved a small hollow. My emergency phone, a prepaid flip model I'd bought 2 years ago, activated in my own name, paid in cash. I'd charged it every month in secret just in case. Peter and Clara had insisted on giving me a house phone they controlled, but I'd been alive too long to trust a line I didn't dial myself. I powered it on. 1 bar. Enough. And then I stared at it, thumb hovering. Should I call the police? What would I say? That my family was mean, neglectful, that they'd taken my pills. I had no bruises, no proof. I was an old woman in a quiet suburban neighborhood, and in the eyes of most systems that made me unreliable by default.
No, not yet.
I called someone else. 1 ring, 2, 3, and then Evelyn. The voice was groggy, familial. I whispered, "It's me," a pause, then sharper. "Are you all right?" "No," I said. "I need you to listen carefully." Samuel didn't interrupt. Not once. He just listened while I laid it all out. The locked door, the missing pills, the safe. The way Clara smiled when she thought no one was watching. When I finished, he exhaled slowly, and I could hear the scrape of his chair as he stood up. "You still have the deed?" he asked. "Yes, top drawer of my sewing cabinet wrapped in a blue cloth." "Good." "And the will?" "In the metal box under the linen chest. Unchanged since 2018. There was a pause. "You want to press charges?" I didn't answer right away. The truth is, I wasn't sure. I didn't want headlines. I didn't want a court battle or whispered gossip at the church. I wanted out. I wanted them out. And I wanted my house back the way it used to be. Full of light. Full of mine. "I want it to stop," I said finally. "I want them to feel what it's like to be shut out." Samuel understood. Of course he did. We'd gone to high school together, and he still called me Evie when no one else was listening. He was a lawyer now, semi-retired, slow-moving, but with a spine like granite. He'd helped settle Gerald's estate and wrote the first draft of my will. "I'll start the paperwork," he said. "Power of attorney. Medical directives, a cease and desist for Clara. I'll need access to the property. You think you can get me in?" "Not yet. Give me 2 days." I ended the call before the battery died, pulled the back off the phone, and tucked it into 3 separate places. Battery under the mattress, SIM card in my shoe, the casing between books. I knew Clara went through my drawers when I wasn't home. She was always tidying, which usually meant erasing traces of me. That morning, I waited for the sound of the front door. 7:42 am, the beep of the alarm, the click of her heels on the tile. Clara never left quietly. 7:45. The engine started. 7:47 silence. I moved fast. It took me 6 full minutes to disassemble the old floor vent. The screws were rusted. But I'd tucked a butter knife behind the nightstand weeks ago, when they removed my tool drawer for safety. I slid the note into the shaft and tapped twice against the pipe, a habit Rosa and I had used as a signal before when the vacuum was too loud. Then I reassembled everything and sat back on the bed, breathing hard, my palms slick with sweat. At 12:02, I heard Rosa's car. She always parked at the edge of the driveway and came in through the back. I couldn't hear much through the floor, but I knew her rhythm. The vacuum first, Then the mop, then dusting. She was methodical, predictable. At 12:29, I heard the cleaning closet door open directly above the vent. I waited, counted 1 minute, 2, 3, then 2 faint taps on the floor. She'd found it. Relief nearly made me dizzy. It was working. That night when Clara returned, I stayed quiet. I didn't touch the crackers, didn't sip the water. Let her think I was fading. Let her believe in her little plan. She came to the door only once. "You okay in there?" she asked, voice high and false. I said nothing. She didn't press. Of course she didn't. In her mind, the house was already hers. Once I was gone. Quietly, conveniently, she and Peter would grieve just long enough to sell. I'd seen the brochures. She kept them in the kitchen drawer under the foil. Lakefront condos, assisted living options, new furniture catalogs. But she'd forgotten the oldest rule of the house. The one who knows the bones of a place is never really powerless. The next morning, I made my second move. I pulled down the shoebox labeled winter scarves and opened the false bottom I'd glued in years ago. Inside, one brass key, old, worn heavy, not for any current door. It opened the attic, not the upstairs attic Peter and Clara used for storage. The crawl attic above the bedrooms. Gerald had installed a lift hatch in 1982 to run new wiring and never removed it. It was still there, hidden beneath a tile in the linen closet. At 3:00 a.m., I moved the nightstand again. The hinges creaked as I slid the panel. My fingers found the latch. It still worked. I pulled the hatch open just enough to slide the key inside, then pushed it shut and reset the tile. Rosa had the note. Samuel had the documents. I had the key. Now all I had to do was wait. Friday night passed slowly, thick with silence and stale air. I lay awake, watching the moonlight slide across the wall like a slow silver tide. My body ached in every corner, each joint stiff from the lack of movement, the swelling, the cold. I hadn't touched the crackers since Thursday. They sat untouched on the plate like a dare. By Saturday morning, I could feel the pressure building behind my eyes, a dull throb blooming into something sharper with each hour. Still, I didn't panic. That's the luxury of age. You've already faced the worst once, maybe twice. Nothing surprises you anymore. Not even betrayal. I heard them downstairs that morning. Clara was laughing, sharp and nasal, her voice bouncing off the kitchen tiles. Peter was quieter as usual. He used to be so talkative. I still remember the way he'd narrate everything he did as a boy. Now I'm brushing my teeth. Now I'm putting on socks. As if the world might disappear if he didn't name it aloud. I waited until they left. Saturday was farmers' market day. They were never home between 10 and noon. I'd learned their schedule like a fox watching the hen house. Once I heard the car pull away. I pulled myself out of bed and sat at the dresser. My reflection startled me. Hollow cheeks, skin too pale. But the eyes, they were still mine. Tired, yes, but steady and sharper than anyone gave me credit for. I reached for my pen. It was one of the last good ones I owned. Smooth ink, just enough weight. I chose a plain white envelope, not the fancy stationery Clara insisted on buying for thank-you notes. Those were kept in the downstairs cabinet out of my reach. I wrote slowly, deliberately. My fingers hurt, but I didn't let them slow me down. Dear Evan, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong, and I need your help. I don't know if you've noticed how strange things have been lately, how you haven't seen me around the house, how your mother makes excuses when you ask about me. I've been locked upstairs, Evan. My medication is gone. My access to the outside world has been cut. Your father hasn't stopped it. Maybe he doesn't know how to. Maybe he's pretending not to see it. But I need you to see it. There's a safe in the front coat closet. They put my pills in there. I don't know the combination, but I do know that what they're doing is wrong, dangerous, possibly criminal. I need you to go to Samuel Gaines. He was your grandfather's lawyer and my friend for over 50 years. He has the documents. He knows what to do. His office is still above the old bakery on 7th. Please don't wait. If I'm not answering your calls, it's because I can't. I love you, Evan. More than words in a letter can say. Always, Grandma. I folded the note carefully, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it. Then I placed it between the pages of Evan's favorite book, the one I knew he always asked about when he visited, The Old Man and the Sea. He'd read it when he was 10 and called it the saddest book in the world. I told him sadness wasn't always a weakness. Sometimes it was a sign of strength. I left the book on the shelf closest to the door, just visible. just casual enough to go unnoticed unless someone was looking for it. Evan always looked. It was all I could do, and now I had to make it until Monday. The pain was rising in waves. I moved slower than ever, the weight of my limbs like iron shackles. My heart thudded it unevenly. Not terrifying yet, but warning me. I drank more water. I paced. I breathed. I kept the air moving in and out. I couldn't afford to collapse now. At 40:17 that afternoon, I heard the doorbell. Too early for Evan. Too late for deliveries. I listened. A man's voice. Then Clara answering the door, light amused. Yes. Then the man again, firmer now. We've had a complaint from someone concerned about Miss Evelyn Birch. May I speak with her directly? I froze. Clara's voice changed. A smile stretched too tight. Oh, I'm afraid she's resting. She hasn't been feeling well lately. Then I'll wait, he replied. I'm required to confirm her well-being in person. A silence. Then, can I see some ID? He handed it over. I couldn't see, of course, but I could imagine her face falling. I crept to the door, pressing my ear close. Clara stalled. Let me just tidy up the upstairs first. No need, he said. Take me to her now. Footsteps. The stairs groaned under their weight, her heels hesitant now. His were heavy, steady, and then the key in the lock, the sound I'd waited days to hear. The door swung open. A tall man in a navy windbreaker stepped into the room. Badge on his chest, a notepad in his hand. Miss Birch? He asked. I nodded slowly, forcing myself upright. My name is Officer Delaney. I'm here to check on you. Clara lingered behind him, arms folded, face pale. I looked directly at her as I answered. I was wondering when someone would finally bother. Officer Delaney didn't miss much. He scanned the room in a slow, deliberate arc, the empty water jug, the uneaten crackers, the metal vent with slightly misaligned screws. Then his eyes landed on me, still perched on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap like a schoolgirl waiting for the head mistress. How long have you been up here alone, ma'am? Clara jumped in before I could speak. She prefers the upstairs. It's quieter. She's very sensitive to noise. Mom, he cut her off gently. I was speaking to Miss Birch. I kept my voice steady. 5 days, no medication, no key, no visits. Delaney's pen scratched across his notepad. Clara laughed, too loud, too sharp. She gets confused. Evelyn's been struggling with her memory lately. That's why we keep things locked for her safety. Forgetting your own name is confusion. I said eyes on her, remembering every minute of mistreatment. That's clarity. The officer looked back at me. Do you feel unsafe in this home? I answered without pause. Yes? He asked a few more questions. I answered each one plainly. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. Reality was enough. Clara's voice wavered the longer it went on. She tried to sound concerned, tried to redirect blame, but the truth had a scent and it was rising. When he stepped out of the room to call in the report, Clara rounded on me, her whisper a hiss. What the hell are you doing? Answering questions, I replied. Something you should try sometime? You're sick, she spat. Everyone knows it. You've been forgetful for months. Peter and I have bent over backwards. To what? I cut in. Hide my mail. Lock up my prescriptions. Play let's see how long she lasts like it's a dinner party game. Her lips parted in shock. I'd never raised my voice to her, not once. But now it wasn't raised. Be careful, Clara, I said quietly. You're not the only one who can play a long game. Officer Delaney returned minutes later, his face unreadable. Ms. Birch, we're going to arrange for a wellness check through Adult Protective Services. In the meantime, I'd like to escort you out of this room and into a safer space. Do you have a preferred hospital or care provider? I'd like to call my attorney, I said, standing slowly. He'll make arrangements. Clara opened her mouth, but Delaney held up a hand. Let's give Ms. Birch some privacy. He led me down the stairs, the same stairs where Peter used to slide down in socks, laughing. Now each step felt like a climb out of a grave. He helped me to the front porch, called in a transport van, and gave me a wool blanket to wrap around my shoulders. It smelled faintly of dust and aftershave. As I waited, Peter pulled into the driveway. He stepped out of the car, briefcase in one hand, confusion on his face. Then he saw me on the porch, the officer beside me, and his mouth fell open. Mom, I said nothing. Clara burst out the front door. They think she's being abused, she shouted, already crying, already building the next story. Can you believe it? Your mother is trying to destroy us. Peter looked between us, frozen. Then he took one hesitant step forward. Mom, why are you doing this? I turned to him. Eyes steady. Why didn't you stop it? He had no answer. The van arrived, humming quietly at the curb. Delaney opened the door for me. Ready, Mom? More than he helped me in before the door closed. I looked back once. Just once. Peter stood in the driveway, staring at the house like he didn't recognize it. Inside, Clara was already on the phone. Probably to her mother, maybe to a lawyer. The performance had begun, but it was too late because Rosa had delivered the note. Samuel had started the process, and Evan, my dear Evan, he was about to do something I hadn't dared to hope for. The hospital was clean and quiet. Two things I hadn't experienced in days. They put me in a small room with a window that faced the trees. I was hooked to an IV within the hour, the nurse working efficiently, kindly as she checked my blood pressure and made soft noises at the numbers. Your pressure's high, sweetheart, but we'll get it under control. You're dehydrated too. I nodded. My throat was sore, voice thin. No medication for 5 days. Her eyes darkened, but she didn't ask questions. I appreciated that not every wound needs to be named to be treated. They let me rest. They offered food. I took only a little, but it stayed down. The clarity that came after the first dose of real medicine was like breathing in fresh air after years in a sealed room. My body still ached, but my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in weeks. By Monday morning, Samuel had come. He walked in like he owned the hospital, though his suit was wrinkled and his shoes were muddy from the rain. Eve, he said gently. You look better than I expected. High praise, I rasped. He pulled a chair to the side of the bed. They've already tried to call me. Clara first, Peter next, both of them in full performance mode. You were confused, fragile. Probably shouldn't be making legal decisions right now. He leaned in, eyes sharp. I recorded everything. Of course you did. I also made copies of the deed, the original will, and the new healthcare proxy. You're now listed as your own primary decision maker with me as secondary and Evan. Samuel smiled. He came to my office on Sunday, found the address all on his own, said he remembered me from Grandpa Gerald's funeral, asked good questions, carried your favorite book like it was a holy text. I felt tears press at the backs of my eyes, not the weak kind, but the hot kind, the kind that come when someone finally sees you clearly. He believes you, Samuel said. He asked if there was anything he could do. There is, I said, and Samuel didn't blink. We talked for 40 minutes, laid it all out. The house, the trust, the plan. That afternoon, Clara and Peter got served. The moment they saw the envelope, I imagine Clara snatched it first, already calculating temporary injunction. Immediate stay of all decisions regarding the estate. Pending investigation by APS and a legal request for full financial disclosure. They would have stood in the kitchen, probably the one I paid for, reading the words over and over, not quite understanding how the walls had shifted. The house wasn't in Peter's name. The power of attorney Clara had forged and filed last year. Null and void, the safe subject to inspection, and most importantly, the owner of the house. The one with all legal authority was sitting comfortably in a hospital bed sipping tea. The only thing they could do now was panic. And that, from what Samuel told me, was exactly what they did. Peter called Samuel 4 times before noon. Left messages like a drowning man. Clara predictably went for drama. She posted on social media crocodile tears about aging parents and false accusations. But she forgot who followed her. She forgot Rosa. She forgot Evan. Because Evan, he had seen the bruises not on my skin but on my spirit. That night he came to the hospital. He didn't bring flowers or cards. Just himself. He sat by the bed in silence for a long time before speaking. I'm sorry, Grandma. I looked at him, tall now, grown, but still with that same crease between his brows he'd had at 7, when he lost his backpack and cried, because it had his lucky pencil in it. You didn't do this, I said gently. I didn't stop it either. He looked down ashamed. I heard them talking about you, he said. Months ago, Mom said you were losing it. Dad didn't argue. I thought maybe you were just getting older. I didn't want to think the worst. You weren't supposed to, I said. That's not your job. He reached into his backpack and pulled out the book, The Old Man and the Sea. The envelope was still tucked inside. I found the letter, he whispered. I read it 10 times. I didn't know what to do, so I just did everything. I took his hand. You did exactly right. We sat like that for a while. No nurse interrupted. No noise broke the quiet. Just a boy and his grandmother piecing things back together. And then Evan said the one thing I didn't expect. I want to move in with you if you'll let me. I blinked. What about school? I can take online classes or switch campuses. I don't want you to be alone. Not anymore. I didn't answer right away. But inside something deep and old shifted. A thread mended. Maybe this house didn't have to be a war zone. Maybe someday it could be a home again. Tuesday morning arrived with fog and headlines. Samuel brought the newspaper to my hospital room like it was a trophy. Front page of the local section, he said, laying it on my tray. Your story is making the rounds. I glanced at the photo. A generic image of a quiet suburban street with a modest brick house, my house. The caption read, elderly homeowner removed from locked room. Family under investigation. I didn't feel pride. Not exactly, but I felt acknowledged. And that was more than I'd been given in years. They're going to spin it, Samuel warned, pulling out a folder. Clara's already filed a motion. Claims she was acting in your best interest, that you were disoriented, refusing help. And the key unexplained. She says you insisted on privacy. That she was trying to respect your dignity. I snorted. She wouldn't recognize dignity if it walked up and slapped her in the face, which unfortunately, he said, the court can't prove either way. But he handed me a copy of the new will, the one I'd quietly updated 3 years ago and filed under Samuel's care. It's airtight, he said. All assets, including the house, held in trust, controlled solely by you until death or voluntary transfer. Upon death, the beneficiary is Evan Birch, not Peter, not Clara. I traced the words with my finger. I remembered writing them late one night after Clara yelled at me in the kitchen for putting the spoons in the wrong drawer. She'd called me forgetful, then turned to Peter and said, it's really not safe for her to be left alone anymore. That night, I called Samuel. That night, I drew a line. Now? It was holding. We've frozen the accounts, Samuel added. Every shared card, every withdrawal linked to your name. Clara tried to transfer funds to a private brokerage account last week. We flagged it. Of course, she did. She also tried to list the house as collateral for a renovation loan. The bank refused after reviewing the deed. Good. I'd worked too hard to let my life be chopped up and mortgaged by people who saw me as a burden. Peter used to bring me every school drawing he made. Now he brought me nothing but silence. Clara, on the other hand, had never brought anything but performance. Her kindness was always a little too loud, her compliments a little too scripted, and now she was scrambling. That afternoon, the hospital received a visitor's request. Clara, I declined. She tried again the next day. Left a message. We need to talk, Evelyn. Please. I didn't reply. Instead, I asked Samuel to schedule an emergency hearing. I wasn't going to let this drag on for months while they plotted another strategy. I want my house back, I told him, and I want them out. Eviction notice. Not yet. Let's give them a choice. Samuel smiled faintly. You're more generous than I would be. I wasn't being generous. I was being precise. Let them decide how far they want to fall. Even visited that evening carrying a small suitcase and a notebook full of forms. I filed for temporary transfer, he said shilly. I'll finish the semester from home. Your parents know. They do now. I didn't ask how that went. I could imagine. He sat by the window watching the sun disappear behind the trees. I think I should have seen it sooner. He said all the little signs. The way Mom always changed the subject when I asked about you. The locked fridge. The separate grocery lists. He paused. It wasn't just you they erased. I nodded. Control starts small. A drawer, a bank statement. Then one day they own your silence. Evan looked at me. Not anymore. The next morning, we filed the notice, official delivered. Undeniable, they had 7 days to vacate. And on the 8th I'd walk through my own front door. Not as a guest, not as a ghost, but as the woman who built it. Clara didn't take the notice. Well, Samuel sent a courier, not because he had to, but because he wanted a signature, proof. Paper that couldn't be twisted with tone or crocodile tears. She refused to sign, told the young man at the door it was all a misunderstanding, that her mother-in-law had been unwell for years, and this was a family matter, not a legal one. But the courier was trained. He left the envelope on the threshold, took a photograph and walked away without comment. They couldn't say they hadn't been warned. That night, Evan texted me from the driveway. He didn't go inside. Mom's pacing, he wrote. Looks like she's been crying. Dad hasn't come out of the office since I got here. Can I stay at the hospital? I told him no. Not because I didn't want him near, but because I knew what came next would be harder for him than it was for me. I'd already been cut off. I had nothing left to lose. He still had parents, a thread fragile, frayed, but there. Let them be the ones to cut it. Wednesday came with rain. The hospital discharged me that afternoon after 2 doctors and a social worker signed off on my capacity, health, and mental clarity. All 3 seemed surprised at how lucid I was, as if locked doors were supposed to make you forget who you are. Evan picked me up, drove my car. The silver Camry Clara, always called the old thing. It still smelled like lavender in the cedar sage I kept in the glove box. We didn't talk much on the drive. The road was slick, windshield wipers ticking like a metronome. As we pulled up to the house, I felt a strange stillness settle over me. Not nerves, not fear, something closer to readiness. Clara answered the door, already bristling. "You can't just, I can," I said, and I have. Peter was in the hallway behind her. His tie was loosened. He looked like a man slowly realizing the fire had already burned through the walls. "You didn't have to make this public," he said quietly. "You didn't have to lock your mother in a room," I answered. Silence. Evan stood between us like a line drawn in the sand. Clara stepped aside, but just barely. I walked through like it was any other Tuesday. Set my purse down on the entry table, took off my coat, looked around. The living room looked the same, beige and soulless. Clara had repainted last fall, said the old colors were too dated. She always had a talent for erasing anything that wasn't hers. Evan followed me upstairs while Peter and Clara argued in hushed tones below. He carried my bag without being asked, set it down gently by the bed. "I'll stay in the guest room," he said. "There's no guest room anymore," I told him. "That's your room now," he smiled, but it was a sad smile. "They'll never forgive me for this." I touched his shoulder. "That's not your burden to carry. You did the right thing. If they don't see it, that's on them." We didn't say much more that night. I was tired. But it wasn't the kind of tired that came from weakness. It was the deep bone-set fatigue that follows a long battle. The kind that arrives after the last door has been kicked open. Downstairs, Clara packed with theatrical sighs, slamming drawers, loud conversations on speakerphone, hoping I'd overhear her saying words like mistreatment and false allegations. I didn't respond, let her talk. Peter didn't slam anything. He moved quietly like a man watching his own life from the outside. He paused in the hallway once, looked up the stairs toward my room. He didn't speak, neither did I. Thursday morning, I came downstairs early, made coffee the way I used to, strong, black with a pinch of cinnamon. The kitchen still had my rhythm in it under the layers of updates and granite countertops. I poured a cup, sat at the table, waited. At 9:12 a.m., Clara appeared with 2 suitcases and a scowl. "This is absurd," she said. "You've embarrassed us, humiliated us." I sipped my coffee. "You locked me in a room. We were trying to protect you. You took my medication." "We were," no, I said, flat and final. "You were protecting your future, and it didn't include me." Peter came in behind her holding a duffel bag and avoiding eye contact. "Evelyn," he started. "I'm your mother," I said. "You can say it." He looked up, ashamed. "Mom." It landed softly between us like an apology he wasn't ready to make. Clara's car door slammed outside. Peter didn't follow. He stood there tired and unshaven. The man I raised now, looking like someone I didn't know. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "Then you won't be disappointed," he nodded. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a soft final click, and I was home again. The first night back in my house, my real house, empty and quiet. I didn't sleep. Not out of fear, out of habit. My body trained to listen for danger. Footsteps, whispers, the rattle of a key in a lock. Didn't yet believe it was over. I lay under my own quilt in my own room, staring at the ceiling where the old plaster crack still stretched like a lazy lightning bolt. I used to trace it with my eyes while waiting for Gerald to come home. And later, while pretending I couldn't hear Clara rearranging the kitchen at 2:00 a.m. Because it didn't flow right now. The only sound was the hum of the heater and the steady breath of Evan asleep in the next room. I got up before dawn, boiled water, opened the windows to let the stale air out. The morning was fogged over, but crisp. My bones liked the chill more than they used to. I made toast, buttered it, sat down at the table with a notepad and a pen. There was still work to do. First, the locks. I called the same man who installed the front door 20 years ago. He still remembered me. Mrs. Birch, you outlived all the hinges I ever sold you. He came that afternoon and replaced everything. Front, back, side, even the attic. I watched him pull the old deadbolt from the door and felt something like a weight lift off my chest. Second, the accounts. Samuel had already frozen the joint cards. Now we closed them, every last one, new cards in my name only, every dollar tracked, every payment authorized only by me. He handed me the paperwork with a solemn look and said, "You've been too generous for too long." I wasn't generous. I said I was hopeful. Third, the space. I moved through the house slowly, peeling back layers of someone else's life. Clara's scented candles in every room. Peter's magazines stacked like he ever read them. A drawer full of protein powders, supplements, empty promises. I threw it all out. Room by room, I reclaimed each square foot. The hardest was the downstairs bathroom. Clara had remodeled it to look like a hotel, all chrome and marble and coldness. But behind the mirror was a photo I'd hidden years ago, a Polaroid of Gerald and me in front of this house the day we closed. Him in his corduroy jacket, me with a ribbon in my hair. We looked absurdly young and wildly certain. I put the photo back on my dresser upstairs where it belonged. Ivan helped without needing to be asked. He cleared out the garage, sorted the mail, set up my new phone. He cooked spaghetti one night badly but proudly. And I ate it with gratitude. We didn't talk much about his parents. He didn't ask where they'd gone or whether they'd call or if he should feel guilty. He didn't need to. On Sunday morning, I walked into the living room to find him asleep on the couch, his textbooks open beside him. A pair of glasses, his grandfather's cleaned and relanced, sat on his nose. And I thought he belongs here. Not because he was young, not because he was obedient, but because he saw me, heard me, stayed. And that after everything was enough. The phone rang that afternoon. Not the new one, the landline I hadn't yet disconnected. I answered out of habit. It was Clara. Her voice was tired. "I just wanted to say," she began, "that we're looking for a place. We'll be out of the city soon," I figured. Pause. "I know you probably think I'm some kind of monster." "No," I said, "monsters don't bother me. It's the cowards who smile while they steal from you that I can't stomach." Silence. "Peter's staying with his sister." She said he doesn't know what to say. "That's convenient. He's had 40 years to practice." "I didn't mean for it to go so far," she whispered. "I believe you." She sounded surprised. "You do? I believe you didn't think I'd survive it." Click. I didn't need to hear her stammer. I didn't need her tears. What she did with her guilt was her business now. Mine was clean. That night I lit a candle, not one of Clara's sickly lavender monstrosities, just a small one, unscented on the windowsill. I sat with a cup of tea, watching the flicker, and I wrote one sentence in my notebook. "This house remembers me again." It took less than 2 weeks for everything to go public. Samuel had warned me, once we file the formal complaint, the press will follow. I didn't care. Let them write what they want. Let the headlines chew on the phrase elder abuse and family betrayal. Let them print my age in bold. I had no interest in hiding anymore. The truth, after all, isn't fragile. People are. The investigation by Adult Protective Services moved quickly, faster than Samuel had seen in a decade. They had the officer's report, the hospital records, the note from the vent, even a statement from Rosa. She had come forward on her own, offered her testimony with a shaking voice and a steady will. She always looked scared, Rosa told them. I wanted to say something sooner, but I didn't know how. I didn't want to lose my job. "You kept me alive," I told her when we met afterward. "Don't you ever forget that." She cried. I didn't. The safe was opened by court order. 2 officers came with Samuel, unlocked it in the presence of a notary. Inside 12 prescription bottles, all labeled untouched. Some had expired, some were still sealed. I'd asked for them every day. Clara had said I'd already taken them. Also inside my mail, full months of it. Bank statements, Medicare letters, a birthday card from a childhood friend I thought had passed. All confiscated, unread, hidden away as if I were a child with dangerous crayons. Samuel held them up one by one, documented, photographed, filed. We also found a folder thick, rubber-banded, full of receipts and plans, Clara's plans, contractor estimates, kitchen redesigns, private school brochures for a new city, a loan application marked pending, using the house as collateral. Peter had signed it. I asked Samuel for a moment alone. I sat on the floor next to the open safe, ran my hand along the cool metal edge. So much of my life had been stored in places like this. Filing cabinets, deposit boxes, attics, and all along the only real safety I'd ever known was what I carried inside me, my own refusal to vanish. The formal charges were filed the following Monday. Neglect. Financial coercion, fraud. Clara would fight it, of course. She had money tucked away, a friend in real estate, a cousin in some firm who could try to delay, distract, deny. Peter wouldn't have it in him. He'd already stopped responding to Samuel's notices, let deadlines pass without answer. He's waiting for someone else to make the decision, Samuel said. Like always, he already did. I said when he turned his face away, I didn't want their money, but I wanted the court to say it. I wanted the words to live in the record. They did this. I did not imagine it. I was not confused because that's the thing they don't tell you about being a woman past 70. Everything you say becomes suspect. Emotion is sility. Anger is hysteria. Certainty is stubbornness. But paper speaks, photos speak, the state speaks, and now they were speaking for me. Evan watched all of it closely. He sat through calls with Samuel, helped me review documents, highlighted mail that needed responses, but more than that, he listened. He never once said, "That's crazy." He never flinched when I mentioned what Clara had said through the door or how I'd saved a butter knife behind the nightstand just in case. One night, I asked him why. "You've always told the truth," he said, even when it wasn't comfortable. I hadn't realized that mattered to him, but now I knew. He also told me something else. "I want to stay long-term," he said. "Not just until school ends. You'd give up everything." He shook his head. "I'm not giving up anything. I'm choosing peace." And that word peace struck me deeper than anything. Because that's what it really came down to, didn't it? Not revenge, not justice, not even restoration, peace. To sit in a home and know it's yours. To wake up and not flinch, to walk to the kitchen without fear of being watched. To open the door, not knock on it. The court hearing was scheduled for early spring. By then, the dogwoods would bloom again outside the kitchen window. Gerald planted them for our anniversary years ago. Clara had once threatened to cut them down, said they dropped too many petals. Messy. But I liked the mess. I liked that nothing stayed clean forever, that nature insisted on leaving a mark. Let the petals fall where they may. I received one more letter from Peter before the hearing. It wasn't handwritten, just an email printed and folded by Samuel, delivered without comment. "Mom, I don't know what to say that won't sound like an excuse. I know I failed you. I know I let things happen that I should have stopped. I thought I was keeping the peace. I didn't realize I was making you invisible." I stopped reading there for a moment. Not because it hurt, but because it was the first time he used the word invisible. And I knew then he finally understood. He continued, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that when Evan called me a coward, I didn't argue because he was right. There were more words, apologies, regret, assurances that he was in therapy now, that he and Clara had separated, that he wasn't trying to win anything back. I didn't write back. I didn't burn the letter either. I just folded it and put it in the same tin box where I kept my wedding ring, the deed to the house, and the last note Gerald ever wrote me. Not because it mattered like those things did, but because it belonged to the same chapter, the one I was finally closing." The hearing was brief. Samuel stood beside me like a quiet pillar. Evan sat just behind, eyes steady. Clara appeared via video, her face drawn, her background blurred. She wore black. Of course she did. Peter wasn't there. The judge asked questions. I answered clearly. I explained the conditions I'd lived in, the medications withheld, the safe, the locked door, the notes, the evidence. When asked how long I'd felt something was wrong, I said, "Since the moment they stopped asking if I was hungry and started deciding what I should eat." It wasn't dramatic, but it landed. Clara's lawyer tried to spin a tale of caregiving overwhelm, cited statistics, claimed burnout, said Clara had taken on too much, had been crying for help in her own way. But when asked why she never reported my decline to a doctor, why she withheld medication instead of adjusting it, why she changed the locks without my consent, there was only silence. The ruling was swift. The court recognized financial coercion, negligence, and emotional abuse. Custody of all property and financial assets was reaffirmed to me. An order was issued preventing Clara from contacting me without written permission. Peter was not named in the order, but the judge noted his pattern of passive complicity. When it was over, the clerk handed me a stamped copy of the decision. "You got your name back," she said softly. I didn't realize how much I'd missed hearing it said with respect. Back home, Even made lemon tea and played an old jazz record I'd forgotten we still owned. We danced once, just a few slow, clumsy steps in the living room. I hadn't danced in years, but my feet remembered. So did my heart. The next morning, I stood in the backyard, cup in hand, watching the dogwood stir in the breeze. The wind scattered pink petals across the grass like confetti. Rosa came by around 10:00. She brought me a jar of homemade preserves and a quiet hug. "You look lighter," she said. "I am," I told her. She stayed for tea. We didn't speak of Clara or Peter. We spoke of spring, of Evan's classes, of how the world keeps turning even when it seems like you've been dropped from it. When she left, I walked through each room again, not checking, just feeling like touching a scar and knowing it no longer hurts. And in the guest room, Evan's room, I found something that made me pause. A printout, a university application, a new program, gerontology, aging studies. When I asked him about it, he shrugged. "Someone should understand this better," he said. I figured, why not me? I couldn't speak. Not at first, but I nodded. Because that was the beginning of a new story. The rhythm of life, once stolen, returns slowly. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets or grand gestures. It trickles in, a mug left drying on the counter. The sound of Ivan laughing at a podcast through the bathroom door. A grocery list written in your own handwriting again. I began cooking dinners. Not because I had to. Ivan was competent enough, but because I wanted to. Roast chicken with thyme. Lentil stew the way Gerald liked it. Peach cobbler with a brown sugar crust. We ate at the kitchen table with the curtains open. No one rushed. No one criticized. Ivan always did the dishes. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. Just sat with the sounds of forks against ceramic and the occasional creak of the house settling. That kind of silence is rare, not heavy, not awkward, just full. Like a room that remembers you. Neighbors began to wave again. Some had believed the story. Others hadn't known what to believe. A few sent letters, polite, worded carefully, saying they were glad to see me back on my feet. One woman from church dropped off a pie and mumbled something about hoping things are better now. I didn't hold it against them. People are strange about pain. They'd rather not see it. But one neighbor, the one from 3 doors down, Lorraine, came over with a small clear plastic bag. Inside a tiny brass key. "I think this fell into our bushes months ago," she said, voice quiet. It was the attic key. Clara must have tossed it out the window in a panic. Or maybe Evan dropped it during one of his sneaky visits. I held it in my palm for a long time after Lorraine left. It was cold and small and a little bent, but it was mine. Later that afternoon I opened the attic, not to hide, to clean. It smelled like cedar and dust and the end of things. Boxes labeled in Gerald's blocky handwriting. Christmas ornaments. A wedding dress yellowed at the edges. A shoebox full of receipts from when groceries cost $20 and change. I found photos, some I remembered, some I'd forgotten I ever took. One of Peter at 12, face sticky with jam. Another of Clara on their wedding day, forced smile and ironed curls. She'd worn my earrings that day, never returned them. I didn't want the photos to disappear, so I brought them downstairs and started a wall. Not a gallery, nothing curated. Just a corner in the hallway near the stairs where the light hit just right in the afternoon. One by one, I tacked them up. No glass, no frames, just memories returned to air. Evan walked past one evening, paused, and pointed at one photo of him as a toddler sitting on Gerald's lap. "I don't remember this." "You were 2, I said. "You fell asleep like that for over an hour." Gerald didn't move the whole time. Said he'd take the cramp if it meant you'd dream longer. Evan stared at it for a while, then took a tack from the table and added a photo of us. One Rosa had taken the week I came home. I was on the porch holding a cup of tea. Evan was standing behind me, hand on my shoulder. It wasn't beautiful, but it was true. We got a letter from Peter the following week. No return address, just a check, blank, and a note. "Whatever I owe, I'll pay. Just tell me how to make it right." Evan tore it up before I could say anything. I didn't stop him. In April, I planted new herbs in the backyard. Thyme, mint, rosemary, the ones Clara had called fussy, and insisted on replacing with ornamental grasses. I dug into the soil with my hands. No gloves, I wanted to feel it. Dirt under the nails, sun on my neck, earth that hadn't forgotten me. Even helped build a new trellis for the climbing beans. Said it was therapeutic. I let him think it was his idea. We worked in comfortable silence, surrounded by wind chimes and the faint smell of tomato seedlings. Later, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned lavender, I sat on the back steps, sipping a tall glass of water, ankles sore, but spirit unburied. Evan joined me barefoot, a little dirty, eyes soft. You ever think, he asked, that maybe this house knew before we did? Knew what? That something was wrong. That something had to break. I looked out across the garden now full of tiny green beginnings. Maybe, I said, but I also think it waited for someone to listen. May arrived with soft mornings and slow coffee. I'd begun walking again, not far, just down the block and back. Evan always offered to come, but I preferred to go alone. I needed the quiet, the rhythm of my own feet on the pavement, the nod of familiar trees that hadn't been pruned into unnatural shapes. There's a certain dignity in being seen just as you are. Not in your prime, not in your decline, but simply present. One morning, a woman I barely knew, Margot from the garden club, stopped me. I read the article, she said. I didn't ask which one. There had been many. She looked at me for a long moment, then added, "Good for you. I hope you made them squirm." I smiled, but I didn't answer. It wasn't about squirming. It was about being heard. That's the part people don't understand. Justice isn't volume. It's clarity. Back at the house, Evan had started painting the back bedroom. Figured I'd turn it into an office, he said. Classes are going well. One of my professors said I should apply for the mentorship program. You should, I said, meaning it. I'm thinking of writing about you. I turned from the stove. For what? My final paper on long-term recovery after familial trauma. I raised an eyebrow. That's what they're calling it now. He laughed. Better than what I had. My grandma is tougher than your dad. I didn't laugh. Instead, I said, if you write it honestly. Don't make me noble. Don't make them monsters. Just tell the truth. That's always enough. He nodded, serious now. I will. And I knew he would. The garden flourished. I sat out there in the afternoons writing in a notebook I kept hidden between the couch cushions. Not a journal, not really. Just pieces of memory, names, places, the kinds of things no one asks about anymore. I wrote about my mother's kitchen, the way Gerald used to hum when he mowed the lawn, how Peter cried the first time he saw snow, how Clara once braided my hair before a church dinner and said softly, "You look like someone important." That was before, long before time hardened her or revealed her. It's hard to know which. I didn't write out of spite. I wrote to remember, to own my own history. Because if I didn't, who would? Samuel came by on a Sunday with fresh bagels and a smirk. I got a call, he said, spreading cream cheese like it was a legal maneuver. From a local reporter, wants to interview you. Piece on elder rights. Thinks you'd be an inspiring voice for women over 60. I rolled my eyes. They just want a headline. Grandma gets revenge. They want a story, he said. And you've got one. I thought for a moment. I'll do it on one condition. He paused. What's that? No glamour? No tragedy, just truth. Samuel grinned. They won't know what to do with that. Good. That night, Evan and I sat on the porch. I was knitting badly and he was scrolling through his phone, laughing at something I didn't need to understand. He looked up suddenly. Do you think you'll ever speak to them again? I didn't ask who he meant. There was only one them. I answered carefully. I think they'll want me to eventually when it's useful. When the silence becomes inconvenient. He waited. And when that happens, I looked out at the darkening sky. The stars coming out, patient and cold. I'll listen, but I won't bend. And I won't invite them in, he nodded. Do you miss them? Yes, I said quietly. But not who they are, who they were, or who I thought they were. There's a difference. Evan reached for my hand. I let him take it. And in the stillness, with the night curled around us like a soft coat, I realized something I hadn't before. I was no longer surviving. I was living. Summer arrived without ceremony. The dogwoods had dropped their last petals. The herbs in the garden were full and unruly. The house smelled like basil and sun-warmed wood. And for the first time in a long time, time itself no longer felt like an enemy. Evan had finished his first term. He hung the certificate above his desk, not out of pride, but as a reminder of choice, of direction, of what it meant to stand up when sitting down was easier. He'd grown quieter in a good way. He didn't flinch at the word family anymore. He didn't wait for the phone to ring. Neither did I. On a Tuesday afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. A handwritten one. The envelope was heavy with care, the name curved with deliberate grace. Clara. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the mantel for 2 full days, like something drying in the air. On the 3rd day I opened it without ceremony. She apologized, not in the frantic, half-measured way she had before, but in the voice of someone who'd finally sat with herself long enough to hear the truth echo back. She wrote that she wasn't asking for absolution, just recognition. She said she'd moved to another state, that Peter was in counseling, that she missed Evan, and would always be grateful he had me. She ended the letter with this: I forgot who the house belonged to, but worse, I forgot who you were. I folded it once neatly and placed it beside Peter's. No reply, no fire, just space. Evan and I hosted Rosa and Samuel for dinner the following weekend. We grilled in the backyard, ate under string lights Evan had hung between the trees. I made potato salad the old way with too much mustard and not enough apology. We laughed more than we spoke. When Rosa left, she hugged me tightly. I don't think you realize what you've done, she said. I didn't do anything special, I answered. She pulled back, looked me in the eye. No, you did something rare. You told the truth and stayed. I didn't have an answer for that. So, I smiled and let the words land where they would. I still write most mornings, not for publication, not for legacy, just to keep the blood warm and the memory honest. Some days I write about my parents, others about the smell of rain on porchwood, or the way Ivan hums when he's concentrating. 1 page at a time. I stitch the years back together, not to dwell, to witness. Because we are not meant to vanish quietly. If you're still reading this, maybe you're someone like me, someone who's been told to quiet down, to step aside, to make room. Maybe you've been locked out of your own life one decision at a time. If that's you, hear this. You are not too old. You are not imagining it. And you are not powerless. Let them forget who owns the house. But you remember, and when the time comes, you take the key. If this story moved you, share it, comment. Send it to someone who needs reminding. There is no age limit on taking your life back.